Welcome back to the Royal Talens Creator Studio. My name is Jeff Olson. I'm the Art Education Director for Royal Talens North America, and today we're going to continue our discussion about watercolors. Did you know that the oldest pigment grinding tools are thought to be more than 350,000 years old? I did not know that. Did you know that dyes played a significant role in the development of immunology, contributing to the cure for malaria? That's right. Pigments and dyes are materials or substances that reflect light that we perceive as color. Watercolors, as in all artist paints, contain either pigments or dyes as their coloring agents. There are three categories of pigments: organic, inorganic, and synthetic. Organic come from plants and animals. Inorganic come from minerals. An example of an organic pigment is carmine. True carmine is derived from the cochineal insect, a small scaly beetle. These little insects are indigenous to Central and South America, where they breed on the underside of prickly pear cactus. Say that 3 times fast. As early as the 2nd century BC, this pigment was widely popular in Aztec and Mayan civilization. After the conquest of the Aztecs by the Spanish, the cochineal pigment trade exploded across Europe. For the Spaniards, it was second only to silver in terms of export from the New World. Many of the deep reds found in Spanish and Italian Baroque painting from this period come from carmine. Inorganic pigments are those that are mineral-based. Some of these pigments, like the ochres and oxides, are the earliest known pigments, some dating back to prehistoric times. The most famous inorganic pigment is ultramarine blue. Do you know what mineral ultramarine blue comes from? Ultramarine blue is from the stone lapis lazuli. Lapis is a semi-precious stone prized since antiquity, mined almost exclusively in Afghanistan. Ultramarine, translated in Latin as being from beyond the sea or over the sea, was the most expensive pigment used in the Renaissance, and was favored by Venetian painters, among others, who selected it for its status as well as its symbolic meaning. Ultramarine was often used for the most important figure in a painting. Examples would be the Virgin Mary, always would wear a flowing ultramarine painted robe. Many of the colors we use today are synthetic. Synthetic pigments originate as being either organic or inorganic, and through a chemical process such as exposure to other ingredients or heat, create a new pigment. They are synthesized for a couple of reasons. One is to improve their working properties. 2 is to make them more cost efficient. Some people think of synthetic pigments as strictly a modern invention, but in fact synthetic pigments have been with us for centuries. Lead white was being produced in the 4th century BC. This ancient process includes stacking the lead with vinegar and cow dung, left for approximately a month to ferment until a white crust formed on the lead, which was then flaked off, washed, dried, and ground, giving it the alternative name of flake white. Dyes versus pigments. When I think about comparing dyes to pigments, I think of a solution compared to a suspension. The primary difference between a pigment and a dye is solubility. Dyes are soluble, allowing them to chemically bond with the material they are being applied to, where pigments are not. Pigments added to a binder form what we refer to as a suspension. Dyes are like salt. When you add them to water, they dissolve completely, creating a solution. Pigmented watercolors are like pepper. When you add them to water and stir them, just like pepper, eventually we'll see some pigment build up at the bottom of the jar. So I've emptied our jars. Here on the right, you can see the dye jar. There's a little bit of blue water back in there, but there's really nothing on the bottom. Here in the pigmented watercolor jar, got a little paint, but as you can see as I kind of turn that around, there's sediment in the bottom. Here you can get a better look at it. You can definitely see the pigment at the bottom of this glass. Here's the dye base one. Nothing at the bottom. How do they compare? Dyes often get a bad rep. Pigments, of course, are the preferred coloring agent of artist materials. There are times when dyes make sense. Here's a comparison. When we talk about adhesion, dyes adhere to the surface much better. Remember, they're a solution, so they completely dissolve and adhere to the material. Lifting is definitely on the side of the pigment. Lifting is that technique where you have dry color down already, and by adding water with a brush, you can lift the color back up. Luminescence. Dyes are much more intense. Just think of all the bright clothes that we wear. Contrast is definitely on the side of dyes. Dyes appear to be much brighter. Your high-key and low-key colors really pop. Color mixing is on the side of dyes, again, because they're a solution we get truer subtractive color mixtures. Lightfastness is on the side of pigments. Pigments, especially those in artist quality, have excellent lightfast ratings. That means they last up to 100 years or more under museum-like conditions. All dyes are what we call fugitive, meaning that they will fade fairly rapidly, most within 10 years. While dyes may be fugitive, due to their increased luminescence and contrast, they are excellent for digital reproduction. So if your work is intended to be photographed, computer enhanced, or shared on social media, you may see better results with a dye-based medium. Today's watercolor demo, we're going to use alcohol as a catalyst, create a dynamic reaction, and create a wonderful effect with the watercolor. Many of you may have seen something like this, but I'm going to show you a new twist on it. I'll lay down a nice wash, fill this area up, and while the paint is still wet, I'm going to drop some alcohol into it. Now, if you've never seen this before, super cool, right? Those of you who had, I don't think it ever gets old. So this is a traditional. When that dries, you can go over the top of it again and create some glazes and some color, optical color mixing, but you can have a lot of fun with it. You can even take some alcohol and make little lines. You know, that pushes the color away. I think that's a lot of fun as well. In the second area, what I'm going to do is a little different, is to put the alcohol on first. So you can kind of see changes in color there. Some big spots there for fun. Get the hair out of there. Let that dry and soak in. It doesn't take very long. It dries even faster than water. The alcohol evaporates very, very quickly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the color over the top of it. This time I'm going to use the green. What you're going to see is magic. It's like a resist. I love how the color gathers where the alcohol drop is evaporated, but yet where there's a little ring of alcohol still, it creates this kind of celestial orb around it. Here's our alcohol dropped into the watercolor. Here's our watercolor over the top of the alcohol. I've let this dry, and what we can do now is add a little color over the top. You'll still see a little bit of resist, which is fun. See that? Super fun, huh? Here you see the finished product. You can see how even after the alcohol is dried, it still has effect on the colors that go over the top. I love these great edges that you're getting. Here, we've created a sense of depth by doing the overlaid wash. We've sunk some of it into the back and brought some to the fore. You can see the potential. Here we have the alcohol dripping into the wet color. Here we have the alcohol first as a resist. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Royal Talens Creator Studio. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.